Good morning, America. How are we doing? Couple days out from Gregg Berhalter's firing, news coming in and out, rumors about who could replace Gregg Berhalter for the USMNT is in overdrive. Steve Cherundolo giving a very coy response when asked about it after their Open Cup game. Certainly not a candidate that we feel is anywhere near the top end candidates that we should be interviewing or looking at. But about that, today I'm going to look at 7 realistic candidates that, what you're going to see a lot from people is Klopp's not available, be happy with an MLS coach. That sort of thinking and narrative, which anybody with half a brain knows doesn't make any sense at all, because there's a huge amount of coaches in between Klopp and an MLS coach that are realistic, that are doable. And so today what I want to do is look at 7 realistic options, all right, including some that I don't want, but I think are a good chance they're at least getting interviewed and considered. And there are plenty more that I think would also be good coaches, but probably aren't realistic in terms of like U.S. Soccer ain't reaching out to this guy. I would be very surprised. So this is a list of guys that I think could happen, not necessarily a list of guys that I really want. Some of them I do. Some of them I would endorse happily. And some of them I am not, would not be excited about. Although if they do hire him, well, I'll go, okay, well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and see how he does. And then we'll take it from there. But how are you guys doing? Anybody got weekend plans? What are you guys up to? Klopp didn't want to go through Crocker's barrage of tests. I think it was probably more than that. Sup, Pete? American Auto Transport. Morning. How are we doing? Pete, is your gut feeling that we are getting an MLS coach? I mean, not just my gut feeling, but history, right? The last coach was an MLS coach. The coach before that was an MLS coach. Klinsmann was really the only exception since Bora in 94. That's so far back, I don't even really count it. After that, they went Steve Sampson, Bruce Arena, Bob Bradley. That's 3 MLS coaches. Then they went to Klinsmann, who was not an MLS coach, but had lived in the U.S. for a long time and had essentially become sort of Americanized. Came in and upset the apple cart and told us all the things we were doing wrong, and he was actually right. Now, he was not a good coach, not a good tactician, but in terms of trying to change the American soccer mindset, Klinsmann was 100% right. And all the feeble little, shills in the media and Don Garber himself freaked out because they don't want accountability and they don't want progress and they don't want pressure. So then after that, they fired him for losing pretty much 2 games, and then hired Bruce back. That became a disaster. Dave Sarakin as an interim coach, and then another MLS coach. So history tells us 80% of the time they want an MLS coach. Well, why? Well, because they want to be able to control them. Right? Especially if you get somebody young and kind of inexperienced and they just feel lucky to get the job, right? Then they're going to be like, no, you do what we say and you say what we do, and that's it. Somebody who's going to come in with real charisma. Also, if you notice, even when they go after MLS coaches, it's always the guys with no charisma. It's like soft-spoken. Right now, I'm the LAFC coach. I'm going to be the LAFC coach for a long time, I think. I don't know, but tomorrow I'm going to be LAFC coach. I have training at 11, guys, and that's what I'm going to. It's always these like guys that you look at and you go, is that really going to inspire the dressing room? Like, guys that they can control and monitor and manipulate. They're never going to say anything too wild, right? So let's start here with Certified Chad. Do the core problems of U.S. soccer still remain? Absolutely. Absolutely they are. Absolutely they are. Tapa Whitmore is free, LOL. Bless up, Pete. Hope you guys get the coach situation sorted. Thank you, JD. Who are you guys going to get now that Jaime is gone? I'm very curious to see who Jamaica is going to get next. But before we jump into the 7 coaching candidates, guys, this stream is sponsored by the 11 Yanks Patreon. Thank you to everybody who helps to support the channel. This is some of the content that you get for $3 a month, guys. That's less than half a cup of coffee. Every single game is broken down tactically, and the key moments are broken down with my thoughts. That's a big part of this stream. We also do Q&As, monthly Q&As after the breakdowns. This is an example of one. I put a stream up. You guys can put your questions in the stream, and I address each question in great detail, which I can't always do in great detail on a stream because we're on a different topic. So these videos that answering your questions last 45, 50 minutes, sometimes an hour, and we also have the top 10 in the Patreon. Every single week, the top 10 is broken down with actual clips because I can use those clips on Patreon. I can't use them on YouTube. Sorry, they kind of it looks blacked out for right now, but it's actually a full video. So yeah, that's it. Thank you to everybody who helps to support the channel on Patreon. You are very, very much appreciated. And thank you to the 11 Yanks Patreon for making this channel possible. Daniel Yabata says, Conquest's third law of politics. The behavior of any bureaucratic organization can best be understood by assuming that it is controlled by a secret cabal of its enemies. This is true with U.S. soccer. Yeah, and look, I've said this many times, right? I very much doubt that U.S. soccer wants soccer to grow in this country. Because if it does, there would be a lot more scrutiny on them, and I don't think they want that. So I think that's why they like to play it safe and why they like to do just enough to keep their fat salaries paid and the fat cats in the organization happy, but never enough to really make a play for relevance in the United States. And that's what's discouraging, right? But good thoughts, Daniel. All right, guys, let's talk about the 7 coaches. And first up, we have my number one, quote-unquote, realistic choice, right? Hervé Renard. All right. Career highlights for Mr. Renard. First ever coach to win AFCON, that's the African Cup of Nations, the regional trophy, their Nations League and Gold Cup, with 2 separate countries, one with a big country, Ivory Coast, and one with Zambia. Led a terrible Saudi Arabia team to a respectable performance at Qatar 2022, being the only team to beat eventual champions Argentina. It does remain to be seen how he performs with the French women's team in Paris. Now, I'm going to tell you guys right now, any coach that we can realistically get, in fact, 99% of coaches in the world have either been fired or have had failures at certain jobs. The only ones that have not are the ones that do not take small teams, right? You look at a Pep Guardiola, right? Sure, he's been successful. He's a great coach. He's also only ever managed Bayern Munich, Barcelona, and Manchester City, right? Same with Klopp. Only ever really, managed Dortmund and Liverpool. Even if you look at Ancelotti, who is a top 3 coach in the world, even he has had his failures with Everton, right? So anybody that we can get is going to have some failures. People will point to that, particularly MLS shills will point to that and go, well, he didn't do blah, 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 and then pretend like an MLS coach is the answer. So you have to take, what they did. He was not a success at Lille for sure. At Morocco, he didn't get out of his group either. He was in a group with Spain and Portugal. There were some failures with this guy, absolutely. But overall, let's talk about pros and cons. He does have a great track record in the international game. This is a guy who is very experienced in the international game. He knows how international soccer works, and that does give you a little bit of comfort because he's not going to come in. He's not going to come in and try to, make it a complicated club ball situation, right? At the international level, he has found significant success, right? So that is a pro for Hervé Renard. He's also fierce. He has a fierce, demanding approach to coaching that would be very good for this group of entitled players. I mean, the amount of times that we heard our players defend Gregg Berhalter and be like, he says good morning to us. There's clearly a problem of entitlement and complacency within our ranks. And that's been very, very clear to me. All right. Not part of the USSF old boys club / crony clusterfuck. And Wyant1 says, Pete, can you use the word clusterfuck on a YouTube PowerPoint presentation? Wyant, I just did. Yay. Yeah. And I think that is very important for us to get an outsider who is experienced at the international level and who is demanding and has high standards, right? Go watch, anybody, if you want, that that video of him talking to the players at halftime, the Saudi players in Qatar, right? They were playing against Argentina and they were losing 1-0. And he got into them for it. He was unhappy with how much space they were giving Messi. He was unhappy with how much respect they were showing to Argentina, which, you would think, oh, come on. And if an American coach did that, all the soccer dads and the shills would be out in force being like, what do you expect? What is he expecting, that we beat Argentina? Well, apparently he did. Right? And he came out and he made his point clear. And what happened? Argentina scored 2 goals after halftime in the opening 15 minutes. And they ended up winning that game. Okay? So this is, Hervé Renard is not going to care about your feelings. He's not going to care about whether or not you had a baby, or whether or not he said good morning to you in the right way. He's exacting, and that is exactly what this team needs. But of course, as with all coaches, there are cons, right? He has had some failures. He had some failures with both Morocco as a national team coach, with Sochaux and Liu, right? So that is something to consider, right? He also, as a con, and I think this is not necessarily a con, but it could be used against him, he might be too dynamic for our soft underbelly of state-sponsored soccer media lemmings to communicate with effectively, right? These guys are the guys that say thank you to Gregg for doing his job, which is being in a press conference and answering questions. And I don't think Hervé Renard's going to sit there and loftball, politically correct soft answers to our media. And if somebody asks a dumb question, he might call them out on it, right? And I think that's something that you'll see mainstream media maybe not being a huge fan of Hervé Renard for that reason. The media also wants somebody that they can interact with in a pleasant way and have their little tea and brush their mustaches before the press conference, right? And I don't know that Hervé Renard is necessarily going to be somebody who they like from a demeanor perspective, right? Because American soccer media is pretty soft. Let's talk about Joachim Löw. All right. He won the DFB Pokal with Stuttgart in 1997, UEFA Cup winner in 98, won the Austrian Bundesliga with Tiro Innsbruck in 2002, took Germany to third place as assistant coach in 2006, took Germany to the Euro 2008 finals. And of course, his big achievement is winning the World Cup in 2014. And already I see some guys in the chat saying he's washed or that they don't want him. And it's like, this man has won a World Cup. And he hasn't worked in the last few years, okay? Which means he's available. And maybe he would be interested in this job, okay? But we would have to approach him and see if he is interested. So when Chelsea fan says that's not realistic, I disagree. This man is a free agent. Maybe he probably prefers national team jobs. Then maybe he doesn't like the pressure or the day in, day out pressure of a club job. Maybe he just prefers, a national team job. And maybe that's why he hasn't worked in the last few years. Okay. So I think he's at least worth talking to. All right. What are the pros of Jogi Löw? Well, he's a World Cup winning manager. He's an excellent tactician. In fact, it was well known in Germany that when Jürgen Klinsmann was the coach and Jogi Löw was the assistant, that Jürgen was the inspirationalist and Jogi Löw was the tactician, right? He was able to help Germany's golden generation achieve the ultimate success. He also had a decent track record as club manager previously, right? So there are a lot of reasons to like Jogi Löw. I mean, the last time we had a World Cup winner as a coach coaching the national team was never. All right. Cons. There are cons with Jogi Löw, as there is with everybody. Germany faded badly after he failed to manage properly the transition between generations. Okay. There are questions about his flexibility with tactics and personnel after 2014, as well as a tendency to scratch and sniff on the touchline. Okay. So obviously I'm sort of being facetious with that last one. But look, here's what you have to remember. Germany faded badly in the 2018. From 2018 onwards, Germany faded quite badly. And really that was down more to the generation that had won the World Cup staying too long. And also, they're not really being a proper replacement players. And so it's easy to criticize Joachim Löw for that. But also, let us remember that Hansi Flick came in after Joachim Löw, and what happened to Hansi? Hansi got grouped in the World Cup as well. All right? Japan got through and Germany did not. So maybe that wasn't all on Joachim Löw, right? Maybe that was more on the player pool. And I still think Germany is in transition, to be honest. They still have a lot of guys that I think they need to move on from. They need to build around the young core, particularly guys like Raum and Musiala and what's his name? Florian Wirtz, right? So let's see what happens. But I think Jogi Löw is certainly somebody that we should reach out to and talk to, because a World Cup winner is a World Cup winner. All right. Next up, let's talk about Pellegrino Matarazzo, the first American on this list. Got Stuttgart promoted to the Bundesliga in 1920, 1 year after taking charge. He also led them to 9th place. People had thought Stuttgart would get relegated. They finished 9th in their first season in the Premier League. All right. After he was fired in the second season, when they started not looking so good, he did take hold of Hoffenheim, right, and took them from near relegation to a respectable mid-table finish in half a season. Then in his second season at Hoffenheim, he led them to finish 7th place in his first full season in charge. So this man has success in the Bundesliga with more than one club. Brent Curry, with a great question here, would be awesome, but why would he leave the Bundesliga? Because the chance to coach in a World Cup at home could be very, very interesting for him, right? That's why. He's also done well enough in the Bundesliga now that he can always come back to the Bundesliga after 2026, maybe with his reputation enhanced, right? And if anything, the reason we won't get him is because U.S. soccer is terrible at recruiting. They're terrible at going, this is the project. This is what we think you can do. And they're just terrible at selling, right? They're terrible at selling an idea or a vision or inspiring. And that's why I think more likely than not, they did contact him last time. He said it was late in the process and it didn't seem like the right fit at that time. But that was a year ago. Now, they might not even reach out to him. If you notice, the mainstream media is not even talking about Pellegrino Matarazzo because he had the audacity to call out their hiring process a little bit, very, very mildly, right? He was like, look, they reached out, was late in the process. Essentially, so I didn't really feel like they were serious about talking to me. It just felt like they were ticking a box. That's kind of the subtext of what he was saying. And so the soft lads over at U.S. Soccer might have taken offense to that. And now they're like, look at, they're talking about all these other guys coaching, even some really unrealistic ones, but they're completely mum on Pellegrino Matarazzo. And that should tell you everything you need to know about how U.S. soccer works. But let's look at the pros. Experience in the Bundesliga with 2 different clubs, demonstrated ability helping underdogs overachieve. Remember, this is a guy who has gotten players and teams to look better or greater than the sum of their parts. And that would be very relevant to the U.S. men's national team. Rated very highly by Julian Nagelsmann, who brought him onto his staff at Hoffenheim. Yeah, Julian Nagelsmann thinks very, very highly of this guy. And he did get a lot of his coaching education in Italy and Germany. He's not really part of the U.S. soccer old boys club. Let's see. What are the cons? He's had some failure in his second Bundesliga season with Stuttgart, getting fired after a 9-game winless streak. And since then, Stuttgart has gone on to new heights, right? Including making it to the top 4 in the Bundesliga. So that's certainly something to consider. He also has 0 international experience, right? And that is always going to be the question when you're hiring a club manager. Do they understand the difference between, club ball and international ball, right? And if they understand that, it can transition well. If they don't understand it, right, well, then it could be problematic in the way that Gregg Berhalter did not really understand it either. So that's Pellegrino Matarazzo. Let's look at David Wagner. Career highlights: led Huddersfield to promotion in the Premier League in the 2017-2018 season. More notably, he kept them up that season near impossibly. All the bookies had Huddersfield to be a sure relegation team, and yet David Wagner did keep them up, okay, which was quite impressive considering the player pool that they had. He also helped Young Boys, the Swiss team, through the qualifying rounds to participate in the Champions League in 2021, which was an interesting time for him. He did turn Norwich into a cohesive promotion playoff team despite missing Sargent for most of the season. I think that if Sargent doesn't get injured, so remember, even without Sargent for most of the season, they still made it to the promotion playoffs. I think that if Sargent stays healthy, they get promoted. I think they finish in a top 2 spot if Sargent stays healthy, right? This guy, so those are his career highlights. Let's look at some of the pros. Has experience working with young players and is very highly regarded by Jurgen Klopp. He worked under Klopp at Dortmund. In fact, he was the Dortmund 2 coach. He has a lot of high-level experience, right? This guy's experience in the Premier League, in the Champions League, in the Championship, in the Bundesliga, in the Swiss League. So, in academy development, he has a lot of experience. He hasn't always been successful everywhere he's gone, let's be honest, right? But he does have a lot of experience and has a reasonable amount of success that he could perhaps be considered. He is also currently a free agent. After, Norwich fired him for making the promotion and then losing to Leeds in the promotion playoffs in the Championship, which maybe was a little reactionary, but we will see. Depends what Norwich looks like now. So he is fired. These are the pros. Let's look at the cons. No national team experience. Again, it's always a risk. Will whatever he does with club, will it translate to the international game? He does also have a spotty record at both Schalke and Young Boys, right? He wasn't great at Schalke. It was kind of a disaster at Schalke. At Young Boys, it wasn't great either. So again, he has some failure on his resume. Now, Schalke has been kind of a disaster for a while now. So it's, again, when the coach leaves and they change the coach multiple times and the club's kind of in disarray, you sort of almost give the coach a pass on that because maybe it's not their fault. But certainly, we can't ignore failures. We have to present it and say, well, these are the concerns with David Wagner, right? So that's David Wagner. Let's talk about Hugo Perez, who does have international experience. He coached the U.S. under-14s and under-15 teams for a while, including many of the current senior team players. He revitalized the El Salvador program with recruiting, inspiration, and vision, albeit not a ton of success. We have to consider, though, that El Salvador punched above their weight. When you look at El Salvador's player pool, when you look at how much the federation meddled with his job and how much the media were against him for trying to get players to push themselves, I think he did a reasonably good job there. Okay? Let's look at the pros. Good record with El Salvador, helping them to punch above their weight in CONCACAF. Just the fact that they even got to the final 8 in World Cup qualifying with the player pool. When the best player you have is Alex Roldan, it's fairly impressive what he did with them. They had an identity. They made life very difficult for opponents. I mean, Gregg Berhalter rarely got the better of him, right? 0-0. He drew Gregg Berhalter's teams twice in El Salvador. One was 1-1 and one was 0-0. He barely lost 1-0 to the U.S. also away. Or was that one at home under Anthony Hudson? They did lose 1-0. I believe it was at home. I believe that was at home. He always made life difficult for the U.S. despite having a significantly inferior player pool, right? He does have national team experience, again, so we know he knows how the international game works, right? It isn't high-level experience. He's never gone to a World Cup or a Copa America, right? It was at home, yes, that's correct. So 1-0 away to the U.S. is pretty decent. He has a good bond with many of the current players who seem very connected with him after their youth experience. And you saw that every time we played El Salvador, the players would go up to him and hug him, and they seem to really like him as a coach, which may be a good thing. It may also not be. No club coaching experience. First senior job was El Salvador. So another way to say that is limited experience, right? No experience outside CONCACAF. So that is certainly something to consider. We're trying to go to a World Cup here. Do we know if what he did with El Salvador will translate to the World Cup? We don't know that. It's a question mark. He has not proved he can be successful with a team of stars and the pressure of needing to win, right? He did it with a bunch of underdogs. And to be fair, the U.S. may be a major underdog in the World Cup too, but it is a bit of a different job. And the expectations are significantly higher with the U.S. He may also not be the hard ass this group of players needs right now. In fact, he might be too buddy-buddy with them to really call them out on their shit. And to be honest, I think we need a coach that is going to call our players out on their shit, especially those in the leadership council, because they need to hang their heads in shame, these players, after that, Copa America performance. All right. Now, these are two coaches who I think are realistic to get, but I want to go on record as saying I don't think we should hire either of them. I don't think either of these coaches are good. Not that they're not good coaches, but I don't think they're ready. I think they need to leave MLS and they need to go prove themselves in Europe or at a good level, right? And then maybe they can be considered in the future. But for right now, these are hard no's. Let's look at the career highlights. Wilfried Nancy took Montreal from a joke of a franchise to second in the East and Eastern Conference semifinalists. Won MLS Cup with Columbus Crew and took them to the finals of CCL, beating Tigres and Monterrey en route. Okay, so on the way to that, did a pretty good job with two different clubs. Exciting, tactically flexible style of play, track record of success with more than one club. These are the pros. And got teams to play greater than the sum of their parts at both places that he's been. So certainly there are some pros. Cons, no experience outside MLS, no international experience. And I think I will add, there is also some questions about where his system could be quite complicated to institute at an international level. So again, it's like we don't know if what he does translates to the international game, right? So a potentially young, interesting coach, but probably needs to leave MLS, go to Europe, even if it's like the French second division, prove himself in a real league, not in a celebration league, right? Steve Cherundolo would be the second one. Seems like there are a lot of, there's a lot of push from the up tops and from their media mouthpieces to get this guy in. Career highlights. Got his coaching education in Germany, far away from the deplorable comedy show that is USSF coaching education. Anybody who's ever taken a coaching license at US Soccer knows exactly what I'm talking about. Has some assistant coaching experience in Germany at Stuttgart, as well with the under-15 national team, German national team. So he did learn a lot. You would think he learned quite a bit over in Germany. He is also an MLS and Supporters Shield winner with Los Angeles Football Club. Right? What are the pros? Well, some success in MLS and, again, a good education/playing career in Germany. Although, to be honest, guys, playing career matters very little. Titi Henry, one of the great players of all time, can't coach himself out of a paper bag. And these are the cons and really the reasons that I do not want Steve Cherundolo. No real experience outside MLS, no international experience, only ever been successful at one club, a club that is very well run and spends a lot of money on top players. He's also a soft-spoken player manager who may not command respect in the USMNT dressing room. That nobody in the coaching pool looks and talks like Gregg Berhalter more than Steve Cherundolo. Just watch that video that I put on Twitter of Steve Cherundolo. They asked him about the job. He's like, this is him, literally. I am LAFC's coach right now. I will be LAFC's coach tomorrow. We have training at 11:15 or an hour later, and I will be there. And not that I want to overly put too much emphasis on the way somebody talks, but body language matters. When you're communicating, whether it's with the press or whether it's with the players or whether it's with your bosses, body language matters. Charisma matters. The way you make a point and the way you get it across has a huge impact on how people respond to you. I mean, this is not just true in soccer. This is true in business. This is true in politics. This is true in life. This is true in dating, right? If you're dating a girl and you go to the date and you're sitting like this the whole time, arms crossed reads as like insecure and nervous, nervous scratching, soft tone of voice, eyes down. All of those things read as uncertain, at the very least and insecure at best. And I don't think that's what we need to inspire this generation to greatness, particularly as we go into 2026. Okay, so I'm not a fan of Steve Cherundolo. Look, if they hire him, I will put my opinion. I will say I believe this is an extremely underwhelming hire. Of course, I'll give him a shot to see what he does. You know, he wasn't wanted at LAFC. By the way, another con is he absolutely flopped at Las Vegas Lights. Before he became LAFC coach, he had a terrible record. I think they were second to last in the league at Las Vegas Lights. So it's not like he has only been successful. He has also had he has had failure at his previous job. Now, there could be lots of reasons for that, but you want to hedge your bets. Coaching in MLS, where there is no promotion relegation and everybody makes the playoffs and there's no real pressure and there's dumb rules, is not at all like coaching in a World Cup. The pressure is not the same. The quality is not the same. The intensity is not the same. And the consequences are not the same. Okay, so I'm sorry. It doesn't mean he's not a good coach. He might be a good coach. If he gets the job, I hope he comes in and does really well, and I'll be rooting for him, right? But it's a risky hire because nothing points to him being a success. We need to hedge our bets. We need to hedge our bets and go, most likely you hire a guy who's proven successful at the international record and is the right fit for this program, right? All right. Let's see. Always knew Joachim Löw was zesty. He does seem a little zesty. Is U.S. and Colombia player level comparable? Yes, it's comparable. Colombia has better player pool. Certainly at the top end, they have a better player pool, but at the bottom end of their player pool, no. It's very, very close between the U.S. and Colombia. What about Pioli? I don't think that U.S. soccer would ever go for somebody like Pioli. I don't think they're ever going to go. So guys like Stefano Pioli or Massimiliano Allegri or Pochettino are guys that I think U.S. soccer is like, we do not need guys with high level. They don't want anybody that's bigger than U.S. soccer. Does that make sense? They don't want anybody that's bigger than U.S. soccer, because if you're bigger than U.S. soccer, they can't control you, right? And that's what they figured out real quick with Jurgen Klinsmann. He was bigger than U.S. soccer, right? Good leaders want success, even if that means getting somebody who's better at everything than you and bigger than you. But if you lead your team to glory, then you benefit. They do not want that over at U.S. soccer. What about, so yeah, that's my thoughts on Pioli, guys. A couple of more here. Both L's, but if you had to pick Dolo or Southgate. I don't like Southgate. I don't want him for the job, and he's probably not leaving England. Or if he does, he's going to the Premier League, very likely. All right, let me just change this lighting. Thank you. But at least Southgate has international experience, and it's been underwhelming with England, but still better than Dolo. But you're right, both L's for sure. Last one here from Julian Vivas, who says, "Hi, Pete, just arrived to the stream. Edgar Moreno says that it looks like it is just a question of time before Cherundolo signs with the USMNT. I mean, look, I don't think it's that close. I don't think anything's been decided yet. It does feel to me, and I think he's just saying that based on what's happening. And I think anybody can kind of read the room and go, it does feel like we're looking at, Dolo, and, it's all the media is trying to push him. And so you kind of see the writing on the wall, but it is not over, guys. Please keep that in mind. Take that same energy that we put into getting Berhalter fired and take that energy into saying no to Cherundolo. Because the reason that they're putting out Cherundolo's name is they're testing the fans. Will the fans accept this? Will they accept this? So they put it out there and watch the reaction. If you go, I don't love it, but it is what it is. And they'll go, okay, phew, we can get away with Cherundolo. But if the fans are like, effing no, we don't want that guy, we demand and expect better. Which, by the way, this level of fan accountability is not something they're used to. They've never had this many fans be so engaged in the process of U.S. soccer. And that is a testament to the growth of the game and the growth of knowledge and the growth of passion in the game in America. And they are not used to it. And it's shocking them. But do not let them get away with gaslighting you into accepting a subpar choice. Make your voice heard. Tell them what you want, what you will accept, what you will not accept. Okay? Because believe me, they monitor social media. Anybody who says they don't care is lying or ignorant. They absolutely do. I can tell you guys this for a fact. I have had people from US Soccer slide into my DMs to protest my tweets. Believe me, I know very well that they monitor it. So we'll see what happens, Julian. We'll see what happens. USSF in early talks with Emilio Estevez. Huh? I don't understand what you're saying. Emilio Estevez is an actor. Emilio Estevez is an actor. Miguel Higuera says Gallardo. Yeah, look, I think Gallardo could be an option, right? Marcelo Gallardo. I don't think U.S. Soccer will ever go for a South American coach. I just don't. I think for a federation that is still very much made up of upper class white suburbanites, I think the idea of a passionate, charismatic South American coach is something that they would never do, right? Why do you think they made that rule last time that you must speak English? That was their way of going, we can probably eliminate a good amount of Latino coaches that way, okay? And if you look at, the amount of Latino players that have come through this program, and that U.S. Soccer has really made a focus on it, significantly less compared to the amount of the soccer-loving Latino public in this country. It is still a largely ignored and underutilized demographic by U.S. Soccer. So as much as I think Gallardo would be a good, or even a Jorge Sampaoli or a Jose Peckerman, one of these guys, heck, why not even a Tata Martino, right? Tata Martino could be somebody that we look at. There are lots of guys that we could look at that are South American coaches, particularly Argentines, who have a very, very good reputation around the world. And yet, we almost always go American. And I think if they're going to go outside the U.S., at best, especially with Matt Crocker, I think they're probably going to go European. And which is fine if you get the right coach, right? It's about getting the right coach. And they still have not done that, right? U.S. Soccer equals racist organization, says Stephen Nagishi. I mean, I think there's probably, a certain, calling somebody racist is a serious accusation, right? So I don't like to throw it around willy-nilly, but I will say that certainly if you look at their engagement with both Latino and inner city communities, it is very, very low. Their engagement with and their love of, which is why they love to play in the Midwest, right? They love to play in the Midwest in very white states like Ohio, for example. So, yeah, something to consider. Not sure if I think they are racist, but I do think there are lots of communities that are definitely underserved or ignored. What do you think of what Marsh said about him not wanting to coach the USMNT? I'm not remotely surprised. I am not remotely surprised. He was mistreated in the interview process. If there even was one, he probably felt like it was a case of, we're going to interview you to tick a box, but you're not getting rehired. But more interesting, what Marsh did say is not just that he didn't want the U.S. job anymore, but that he probably wouldn't be interested in it in the future unless there is a complete overhaul of U.S. soccer. And that is the same thing. That is the same thing that we have been saying for the longest time, that U.S. soccer is a corrupt, cronyistic, nepotistic, incompetent organization that cares a lot more about power and money than they do about growing the game in this country. And that was probably the final straw for Marsh. That was the final straw for Jesse Marsh. And you know what? To his credit, he got Canada far overperforming the U.S. at Copa America. So good for him. All right, guys, that's it for the stream. Smash the like button before you go. Patreon is available if you want. We're doing a Q&A this coming week for the Patreon. And then all of the Olympics, the Olympic games will be treated the same way we treat national team games on Patreon, broken down the day after. So thanks, guys. Gus Bus, did I miss yours? Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that one. My bad. My bad, dog. What would have been the minimum bar of success if we hired Klopp? I would say the minimum bar of success would be a quarterfinal at the World Cup. Nations League and Gold Cup wins are a given. They should be. I agree. 1/4 finals in 2026, thus 2 wins in knockout stage. I think quarterfinals. Yes, quarterfinals. Gus Bus is the way to look at it, because there's going to be 2 rounds before the quarterfinals. So you have to win. You have to get out of your group, which will be a very easy group, and then you got to get to at least the quarterfinals. And if you play a big team in the quarterfinal, then you got to give them a real run for their money and potentially make a semi. That should be the standard for this team. Not, you set your standard and you go, this is what we expect. It's not unrealistic to expect this if you are a good quality, competent coach who knows how to inspire, coach, and adjust, right? So, but we're not going to get Klopp, it doesn't look like. But even so, with other good coaches, with any coach, that should be the standard. It's like, we're not going to adjust our standard just because US Soccer decides to hire an underwhelming coach, right? Like, we're going to have the standard and go, this is what we can realistically expect with our player pool if it's maximized, and it is your job to maximize it. And if you don't do it, then it's a failure. And the players too. It'll be a failure on them as well. Thanks for watching, guys. Like I said, smash that like button before you go. Have a great weekend. Tomorrow, I will be doing the Euro final, live watch along for the Euro Cup final, Spain versus England. Let's go Spain. So join me for that if you want, or don't. It's going to be fun, though. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for everything. Talk to y'all soon.